Hopefully everybody got a quick break. We're going to reconvene here for session 2. All right. Are we quiet? Yeah. All right. Everybody's settling back in. All right. Sherry, Paula, you're on.
Hello, and welcome to the report section. So my name again is Sherry Moore. I am your lead for direct services, MAXCapture specifically. And this is Paula Schmidt, and she is over MAC, RMTS, and cost settlement. So I found this lovely quote that I will share with you. The goal is to turn data into information and information into insight. I personally believe that this is the main benefit of incorporating SSG's reports into your day-to-day lives, monitoring your LEA's program compliance and activities, but also to gain insight for areas of growth, program participation, and maintaining program compliance. I go first. It's my show. So first, we're going to talk about MAXCapture reports, and then we'll move into the exceptions reports and on to the management reports. Later, Paula will continue with the RMTS, MAC, and cost settlement. All right, so I really am excited to share these reports with you. So we're going to talk about a few of the online MAXCapture reports, the exceptions reports, and the monthly management reports, as well as the new report that Siva mentioned yesterday, PAH 108. All right, so our first report is the Service Detail Combined Report. I absolutely love this report because it allows you to pull all services that have been entered into the system, regardless of the manner in which it was entered. So if your providers or yourself had manually entered services or done an upload, you will be able to capture all of those services in one unified list. And the neat thing about this is you can run it in a multiple different ways. And for coordinators, this is going to be really important for you, specifically to identify the status of services through that sweep process. And you can run it for 3 to 6 month consecutive periods if you choose, depending on how you run the report. It will be useful for monitoring your Medicaid services and supporting documentation as it allows flexibility in how the reports can be run. Now, I'm hoping all of you are thinking right now, oh, self-audits. Yes, this is the report for you. This report will aid in you being able to monitor your overall program. Now, you can run this reports in several different ways. You'll see here, I have a screenshot of the open tab, which is when you run this report under reports, you'll see that there's a provider field and a student field. If you leave both of these fields empty, you can run the report for a 3 consecutive month period. And that will be useful if you choose to do quarterly self-audits, or if you just want to do a period in time. That will be great for that. Now, you can also run the report by filling in the provider field or the student field or both, and then the report can be run for a 6-month period. One of the things that I like about this report is that it runs in an Excel format, which is very similar to, it's actually the same as the provider service detail report that your providers have access to. Excel for me provides a lot of flexibility to sort the information, compare, analyze, and graph the information, specifically if you want to create a report about the health of your project and where and more information about your services. This is a great report to share out to your superintendent, CFO, and other related administrators. On the other side, it's also good for identifying and monitoring direct services, as well as to determine areas of growth or project considerations. Here's an example of what the report looks like once it's run. Coordinators can view key details. I'm not sure if you can see the specific details, but what it says in the header line is the student ID, student district, student birth date, service date. I'm going to flip over to a couple of other columns here: service code, the service date, and then the status report, status of the service, and then the date that it's entered. This report I have found is useful, specifically when you're trying to figure out where a set of services are in the process. You run this report, and let's say it's the services for our demo student here, which you'll be hearing a lot about today. I'm missing speech and language services. I ran this report and I can see that those services have been entered and they are in the process of being transmitted. I did not find them on my exceptions report, so my assumption is that it's in process somewhere at Medicaid for consideration of reimbursement. This report will allow coordinators to identify timely and consistent entries. It'll also allow you to verify clear, concise student progress as identified in the notes, and that services are flowing through the claim schedule as expected. My next report that I'd like to share with you is the pending approval summary report. Coordinators and supervisors have access to this report. It will be useful to monitor that services are regularly being approved by a designated supervisor. Remember, in the first session, we talked about that service approvals should be completed for all services that are 31 and more days old in the system, so that we can capture those Medicaid reimbursements. It is the responsibility of LEAs to make sure that services requiring approval have been successfully approved prior to a claim schedule. Otherwise, we won't be able to submit your services through Medicaid as expected until that is done. So to run this report, and you can see on my screen the page where you identify the areas that you want to run, or how you want the report to run. So you identify that student with Medicaid, and you can see here that what is showing on the screen is all the defaults that the report shows. So you can leave that with all. Provider status, it does allow you to change it to all or inactive or active. Here I have it as active. And then you can either choose at the bottom, you can choose specific providers if you like, or you can select the box next to ID and it will select all providers. Once those things have been identified, you can select export. You do have the option though to run this report in PDF or Excel. Here is the PDF version, and it shows you like more of a professional document that you might present to someone. What I'm highlighting here is the different areas. So the first yellow border will tell you the provider's name and ID and the days pending. And so if you look down on each of those columns, you can see specific information under those headings. Let's go to the next slide. I have a close-up because this one looks really blurry to me. On this one, you'll see I've specifically chosen PCA 19. As you can see, it displays the number of outstanding services by days pending, separated by service type. So this is just one service type with one provider showing. It is recommended, again, that that you review this report on a monthly basis and verify that services that are 31 days or older have been approved through the system. Our next report is the auth actual report. This will be useful in monitoring and to provide oversight along with regular and consistent self-audits to verify that balanced claiming has occurred. Keep in mind what Devin told you earlier, consistency is the key. And this is a report to show you that that is occurring. Coordinators will use this report to compare service minutes that have been entered into MAXCapture to those that have been indicated on a student's IEP. So let's stop there for a second. I want you to visualize the maintain student or a student profile where you entered the IEP tab. You remember that field below the start and end date that Siva talked about that said that that was an optional field? In order for this report to export as expected, that those items underneath where it says service types, they will need to be completed in their entirety. That means that you will have to identify that it's on the IEP and that the minutes are indicated for either individual or group, and that the frequency has also been identified. This report will be helpful in establishing medical necessity of services, and it can be run in 5 separate ways. And one of the ways is a chart. I love visuals. I'm a speech language pathologist, so anything that can make things concrete and look pretty, that's for me. And we're going to talk about each of the 5 different ways. I'm not trying to confuse you with my screenshots, but I am trying to show you an idea of what the PDF and the Excel formats look like once they're run. So at the top will be the PDF version and below will be the Excel. And then we'll sum up with this we'll sum up this report with the visual about the chart and how that chart can be used. All right, so all provider types have access to this report. Specifically, you as coordinators will use this report to compare service minutes based on compared to the minutes that have been provided versus those minutes that have been identified on the IEP tab for each of your students. To run this report, you will see at the very top of the screen, oh, let me go back one and talk to you about this. So at the very top of our screenshot here, it has 4 different indicators here. So you have by provider or by student. I'm hoping you can see my cursor. And then you have the option of summary and detail. So the first report that I am going to run is going to be by provider, by summary. And on this screenshot, you can see that I have selected a student, and that student has been added to these 4 providers that are listed under provider here on the left. The number of minutes that are included on the IEP tab combined, and then the total minutes that each of these providers have provided for that student in MAXCapture. You can see that 2 of the 4 have actually provided direct services. On the other side, you'll see the student's name along with his minutes and the total minutes that have been provided to him. In the Excel document, the same information is provided, just given to you in an Excel format. The next one, I have run the report using by provider, by summary. And it shows a quick summary, not a detailed summary like we saw previously, but it shows a quick summary of the student, here 3 providers that are showing, and the minutes that were provided. 4 providers that are showing. So you can see here, it'll show provider information at the bottom along with those service minutes, and the student's details are at the top. Same in the Excel document below that. You can run the report by student using the same features, either by detail or by summary. Here's what it looks like by detailed. So the student's information along with the minutes on the IEP and what's been provided combined, along with the provider details and their service minutes. And here is a summary report where it just shows you the student along with the minutes that are included on the IEP and those that were provided. And lastly, the chart. I like pie charts. My favorite, yes. So here I ran the report by student, by summary, and then I clicked on the button, and I'm going to go back to that page. Oops. Right here. So you see at the bottom, it says service time chart. There's a few ways that you can run this report. You can choose to enter a student's information and find out service information for one student, or you can leave that blank and do it by each different service type. So under the service type, which is here, you'll select the service type that you want. And then when that is open up, the system will automatically choose all of the different service types that are listed on the service entry screen. Now it will choose and select those that have the asterisk next to it, but you will have the option of selecting the other ones that are non-billable, such as the non-billable code, or the student was absent, or the provider was absent, etc. And then will select the provider. All right, so I'm going to go back. Sorry about my quick run through here. I'm going to go back to the pie chart. Now, as you can see on this, you will see that there's a legend to the right, and the blue is for evaluations because that's what was entered into the system. And the large part of our pie chart is for the type of service that was provided, which was individual services for speech, I believe it is. And so this is a really nice chart. If you wanted to provide specific information about how services were being generated or entered into MAXCapture, say maybe you wanted to present to a school board or CFO, what I have done is I've run this report for all of my service types with no students identified. I get this really nice pie charts because everybody likes pictures, right? And it shows a quick capture of all the service types with these lovely colorful pie slices. And it's a really interesting way to present the information so that you can share how the progress of your billing capturing is going. One thing I do want to tell you is that when you run this report, you will notice that the date range is going to be from Sunday to Saturday, and that this report can be run for a 12-month period. So then you can run this report in June for the whole entire school year and get a really good, quick view of what was captured in your district. All right, we're going to jump over to the exceptions report so that I can provide you another useful report known as the student list for IEP and med-off services. We did talk about this a little bit in our last session. Just to recap, so services are entered into MAXCapture, and then the services are swept. They're either identified whether or not they have an error. If they have an error, that error will be identified as denied or suspended. And then this chart just tells you how that cycles through. So once corrections are made on a suspended service, it will go back into the system. I mean, it will stay in the system, but it will be swept at the next sweep cycle and moved on if there are no additional edits or errors onto Medicaid for consideration. Denied claims, once those are corrected, they do need to be re-entered into the system in order to continue through the process following your regular claim schedule. Here is an example of an exceptions report. Don't worry if you can't read it. We're going to talk about this pretty specifically. So the exception report is delivered 2 Saturdays following the sweep cycle. Keep in mind that all services need to be entered the night before the sweep date so that it can be swept as expected. and it will sweep all service dates 31 days prior to the sweep date. So if your sweep date is August 1st, you know that all services up to June 30th, back to the beginning of the school year, would need to be entered into the system prior to the night before the sweep schedule. This report again contains all of the services that did not pass the initial edit review, and this is a report that coordinators should spend a significant amount of time just verifying that all the information in MAXCapture has been properly captured so that services can continue on and bring in the money. The exceptions report is provided in a 2-page Excel document. So this is the first page that identifies the services, the status, and whether or not you can see in that far, I think that's the right side. Right side is what cycle the service was captured in. You'll notice here that I have one service that was from a previous sweep that was done, but the rest were all current. Once a service has been marked denied, you'll see here on row 53, there are 2 denied services here, and they're current. So my next sweep cycle, I will not see on the exceptions report those denied claims, because they will, once a claim is denied, they're stopped right there. They're not saved. They're removed from the system, and they don't go again in the next sweep. So the second tab is the exceptions reasonings. And this tab will be helpful in identifying by failure code the description and the status. All right. So this exceptions report was just delivered for a sweep that occurred on August 2nd, 2024. The coordinator has identified a number of CM 202 and 204 errors, but the coordinator recently updated both the IEP and MED-OFFs in the system. So looking at this report, we can see that our demo student has individual speech services that have been suspended for the dates of May 6th to June 17th, 2024. I want you to keep in mind that the sweep date is August 2nd. Don't worry, I will remind you. In this scenario, so here we have those service dates, May 6th to June 17th. The first step that the coordinator is going to do is to open up the student's profile and verify that the IEP is in the system. We can see clearly that the IEP is in the system, and it does cover those service dates. So when this occurs, the next step that the coordinator would want to take, is to open that student list and be sure to check the box next to IEP data. Now, there are 2 options about how to run this report. You can either select the IEP dates, or you can select the latest IEP. You can also identify the student information so that you can pull up that specific student's information, and then either select the box next to service type to select all services, or you can choose the specific service that you want. And then you will select export. What this report will show you is when the IEP information was added to MAXCapture or updated, or both. And as you can see here, I've run this report for demo student, and you can see for speech and language, that IEP was added on August 6th and 5th, and then updated on the 9th. Again, the sweep cycle, or the sweep date, was August 2nd. So we clearly know that the sweep occurred first, and then the information was added into the system. So in this case, services will sweep at the next sweep cycle, as long as there were no other additional errors connected to it. Now, this is one of our most common errors, which is CM 202, which deals with the MED-OFF not being available at the time of the sweep for the service dates. Again, the service dates are May 6th to June 17th. And I've highlighted the rows that I particularly pay attention to when I see these codes. And it will be the service date, the service type, and the service code, as well as what reporting cycle the service was first initially identified as being suspended on this report. The same steps apply as what we took when we were triaging the missing IEP. So in this case, we would open up the MED-OFF services. We see clearly that there is a MED-OFF in place. So the next step that the coordinator will take is to run the student list, but this time choosing MED-OFF services. And the same details apply. You can choose the authorization date range, or you can choose the latest authorization along with the student information and the type of service. And you will select export to open the report. And this is what it looks like. In this case, I ran it for all services, and all services on all MED-OFFs that were in the system. And we can see here that the services for the MED-OFF were added on August 8th and then updated on the 9th. So this MED-OFF 2 is in place now, and it was added following the sweep cycle. So in this case, we know that these services are going to be swept at the next sweep cycle. All right, so here's the fun part, guys. We're moving over to the monthly management reports. And bear with me because I opened them all once. All right. All right, so I'm going to move this one over. So there are 8 different monthly management reports that will be provided to our LEAs about mid-month every month. These 8 reports will be made available in MAXCapture under File Transfer Monthly Management Reports. And you can use these reports to identify the progress of your district's claims, as well as payment details for those direct services. Each of the reports will be delivered in an Excel format, which will allow you to make the ability to sort, filter, compare data, as well as develop customizable reports to showcase the progress of your LEA's Medicaid project. All right, so the first report that I'm running, or I ran, is our PAH 101. This report is also known as the Claim Summary by Date Paid. And it will provide a summary of payments by month. So you'll see the month is listed here. In this case, it's January 2024. And then you'll see down here, the payment month is here. So as the year progresses, this report will show February, March, April, May, etc. The claims, and what you'll see here is the gross claims that were submitted. You'll see I have school age direct services as well as EI, just to give you a good example of the landscape on this report. So these are the gross claims submitted and my net paid claims. Moving forward, we do have 3 columns that talk about claims adjustments and other adjustments. Claims adjustments are where any rebills, voids, or BPI recoupments, excuse me, for the claims that were submitted by SSG. Other adjustments shows any adjustments or recoupments that were received from Medicaid but were not tracked by SSG. This report will also show you the number of dollars of denied claims, total claim amount or count, average claim count, as well as student claims. So the number of claims by students is listed here. All right, we're going to go to our next report, which is PAH 102. I'm going to make that bigger. Here's the report. You can see that the reports are set up fairly similar, and that's on purpose, less to memorize, right? And this report provides a summary of payments by month based on service date. So the last report told you the month that it was paid. This one tells you based on service date. So August 2023, I submitted $8,500 in claims, and I was paid $3,400. And just to show you the rest of the columns, you can see that's very similar to what's listed on the first report. Let's go on over to the next one, which is PAH 103. This report is for those districts that have responsible districts. Keep in mind, so this one is PAH 103, but it's called Claim Summary by Responsible District. It's very important that if you do have responsible districts that you want to monitor the claims that they submit, that you have properly identified the responsible district on the student's profile. And that would be the demographic page of the student's profile. Otherwise, this report won't work as expected. This report provides a summary of payments that are broken down by payment month, which you see here, and by responsible district. So you'll see I have responsible district 1, and if I had other districts, they would be listed out here. Our next report is PAH 104, which is our claim analysis by paid date. And here's a quick view of that report. Oops. This report provides a comparison of current month versus same month prior year, as well as current year and prior year. This report will show you a great comparison between your previous month and your past month, previous school year and past school year. It does run by service type, so you can see here in column B, the service types are listed by paid month, which is up here. And this report is going to be incredibly useful for analyzing trends, but also being able to drill down into any revenue gaps by service type. So we can see that we're missing some services. We can look back and see why, if we were expecting, say, transportation or some other service that's not listed, we could go back and find out and drill down to see why those services are not being identified. All right, our next report is PAH 105. That report is also known as Claim Summary by Service Procedure Code. This one is going to be extremely helpful to verify when that you have received interim payments for each of those service areas that you plan to present expenditures on the cost settlement side. So this report is run by school year, and it's a combined total by service type and procedure code. These procedure codes match what's written in our SBAP handbook on section 3. And this report will also be useful in identifying and analyzing trends and being able to drill down into the revenue gaps by those procedure codes. I'll keep going down so you can see all of this. It does include transportation as well. This is our demo site, so it will show both EI and SA. Our next report is PAH 106. And this is our claim denials by RA date or remittance advice date. So here's where all your denied claims will appear. These are denied claims from Medicaid. And it does run by month. So it's not a cumulative listing of the services that were denied. It is by the month submitted. And you'll see here that this report is written with two tabs. The first tab gives you the service date information, remark and reasons codes. And the second page gives you a description of what those reason codes pertain to. Keep in mind, we want you to be reviewing your exceptions report and not getting too far into the denial reasons, but this is available for you. Specifically, if you have denial codes, end codes that are for all of your services, and that represents a concern for you, that would, in that case, you would reach out to DHS for further support. All right, our next one is PAH 107. And this is where your FAI information will be. So this is called PAH 107 LEA payments. And just keep in mind that you will see those payment information and processing fee information just for the time that SSG has been providing information for your Medicaid reimbursements. So we started with this in January. The Medicaid payments will be listed as well as the processing fees that will be taken out. If you do make a request on your FAI dollars, you will also see that here as for whatever amount of money that you took out. Keep in mind though, if you need additional balance information prior to when SSG started covering your Medicaid reimbursements, to reach out to PDE for that information. All right, and our last report, which is our newest report, is PAH 108, and that's the paid claims detailed report. This one is going to be really helpful for you in identifying all of those services that have paid. So as you can see here, it does show you the student ID along with the student's first and last name, date of service, service type, paid amount, and then the RA date, as well as responsible district information, and then the claim code control number. It will not include any other adjustments, but it does give you a really clear view of what services were identified on that first report, PAH 101. And that is the end of my part. So I'm going to turn this over to Paula.
All right, can you hear me? Is it coming through my mic? Okay, great. Sherry, how do you get this back on? Oh, sorry. I think you have to click on the screen again somewhere. I'll keep going because it's going to go. Okay, great. I am pleased to be able to present these reports on the e-SivicMACS side. It seems we don't often have an opportunity to really drill down to some of these reports that'll be useful for you. So I'm really excited to have a little bit of time today to spend that time going through these reports. So in RMTS, there's 5 important reports and they're listed here on the screen. So let's go ahead and the first two, the RR200 and the RR201, are essentially the same report. They provide essentially the same information. The difference is the RR200 is always pointed at next quarter. So if you're in the middle of a quarter or the quarter has started, and you pull up an RR200 report, just know that the system is already pointed at that next quarter. So on October 1, you pull up RR 200, it is already pointed and looking at what your participant list is going to look like for January through March. The second report, the RR 201 report, that report is always looking at a current sample or a prior sample of your choice. So that's the difference between those two reports. So let's take a look at the RR 200 first. This report gives you a list of all the participants that are active for, again, the next or upcoming quarter. This report is viewable in PDF and Excel formats. I personally recommend exporting this report to Excel just because it's an easier view and because of the export upload capabilities. And using those export upload capabilities, this report can be exported, used to make needed quarterly staff modifications, and then uploaded back into the system. Let me move to an example of this report as I cover the additional bullets on the page. So here is what the report looks like in Excel. This report is going to all be on one row. It's just on 2 rows for this slide example, but it provides the staff participant information such as the participant ID, the first and last name, position names and codes, work schedules, email addresses, and the LEA coordinator, who is normally the contact one email, as well as other associated emails for additional contact folks at your district. These folks are going to be the ones that are going to reach out should a moment not be answered timely. So this report for the RR 200, it includes your administrative and direct staff pools. You can pick one or the other, but it does have the functionality, if selected, to include both on one report. And both staff pools, as a reminder, should be represented quarterly. Just a reminder, we have a lot of questions. The participant ID is an absolute field. This field is linked to the position of first assignment. So if a position is replaced mid-quarter, this field remains the same. SSG recommends using a numeric naming configuration for the participant ID that might better identify the position that that participant is in, to avoid mismatches between the employee ID and the employee name when personnel changes occur. Quarterly, those boxed sections that are highlighted that you see on your screen, all of those should be thoroughly reviewed quarterly for allowable staff inclusion in the RMTS and updates made where needed. Employee ID, type, and notes fields can also be used for the LEA to match for HR and payroll data. So just know that sometimes when certifications are done, if there is no additions or deletions to the staff pool list, there are times when you might feel inclined to just say, well, I don't have any changes, I'm just going to go ahead and certify. But I would recommend you run this report and take a look at the boxes that are highlighted on the screen and make sure that none of those boxes have changes that have occurred. Maybe their email has changed, maybe they've had a name change, they've gotten married, and just make sure that that work schedule is still appropriate for the time that they're working at your school. When using the import-export feature, column headings and column order should not be changed in any way. Changing the naming convention of the column headers or changing the order in which they fall could cause or will cause your upload to fail. I highly recommend you running this report to ensure the accuracy of your data each and every quarter before certifying your participant list. So again, just to recap, the RR 201 provides the same information as the RR 200, except this report looks at a current quarter or a prior quarter of your choice. From the report options box, you'll select your staff pool individually on this report, either administrative staff or direct service staff. So if you want to see both, you're going to have to print 2 reports. Make sure, again, both staff pools are represented when looking at current or past quarters. Use this report to confirm email addresses or follow up on notes that you may have made from a prior quarter, such as no longer employed, when you're updating your next quarter. And when used by your financial team, this report is useful for quarterly MAC reporting. So the next report that's actually on your screen is the RR202, the quarterly participant counts. This report provides a count of participants and work schedules by cost or staff pool for a selected sample. In this example, the LEA's participant and schedule count per staff pool. This may be helpful when you're looking to confirm those different work schedules or your staff pool count. This could be a quick view to verify those totals. So the next report we're going to look at that we've talked about in some length earlier in this training is the RR440, or the no response report. It's located in the reports section of e-SivicMACS under response reports and provides a list of moments that have occurred but have not yet been responded to. Reported in real time, this is an excellent report to follow up with someone who has not yet responded to their moment. This report as well is available in PDF and Excel, and I personally like the Excel version because of the sort functionality to meet a variety of different needs that I have, and the ability to copy and paste the participant email addresses, which would be very useful for quick email follow-up notifications with those participants that have not yet answered a moment. This report is run by selecting sample and staff pool from the report options page. Both staff pools should be run to provide an accurate picture of moment non-responses across both staff pools. This report can be run by date or date range, giving the most flexibility in monitoring your participant non-responses. This report is even more critical to monitor regularly, and I hope you all are using it on a regular basis. And as future program response time is planned to be reduced from 5 to 2 day response window in the future, it makes it even that much more critical to just have a pulse on those participants that have not answered their moments. The last report in the RMTS section that I'd like to touch on is the make sure I'm on the right one, RR510 Quarterly Sample Compliance Report. It is found under the Response Report section of your reporting tab. This report provides a snapshot of response rates and percentages by cost pool. So the cost pools are separated. Again, it's available in PDF and Excel. I like to view the PDF on this one just because it's a little easier view, but a good Excel view is also provided based on your needs. This report can be run by sample period and reports out across both staff pools. This report has a date field that defaults to the current date, but can be run by any specific date as of your choice, as of date of your choice. It provides the total moments generated for a sample, the number of moments that have occurred to date, the number of moments responded to by date, and the current response rate to date. Also, further to the right, the number of moments that are still queued to go out, and the projected response based on if those future moments that go out are answered timely within the response window. Remember, the goal for RMTS for response rate is 100%. Okay, it has changed. So now we're going to move on to the quarterly ad for MAC. And I'm going to skip right to the invoice because this is the report and the information that is most commonly requested. Where can I see this information? Where is my invoice report? And where can I see how my claim was calculated? So for the quarterly MAC report, this is going to be the RR 731, the administrative claim invoice. And before I actually show you the invoice, this report provides details of the quarterly MAC claim calculation and includes the federal, state, and LEA share of the claim. Calculations are represented with letter identifiers for each column, which makes for easier navigation for you all left to right. Couple of acronyms that I just want to review that are provided in the report that you're going to see is RMS, which is calculated as a percentage, your random moment percentage, MER, which is your Medicaid eligibility, and FFP, which is your federal financial participation rate. So let's take a look at what that invoice looks like. Okay, so starting from the top, it's not reflected on this screen, but at the top of the claim invoice, it's going to actually give you the sample quarter that it's reporting on. And then below that, it's going to also have your LEA name. So if you're in charge of several LEAs, it does, give you that distinction so you can clearly know which LEA you're looking at. The first table in this illustration outlines the basic expenditures LEAs reported for salaries, benefits, and other costs by cost pool. And all calculations are going to run from left to right. The far right gives you a calculation outcome and the equation used in the calculation of your base expenditure. So for this one, you're going to actually see for administrative services and direct services, these are the salaries and benefits that you reported. You're going to have your other costs, and then you see your total C equals A and B, and that's in your base expenditures. The next section is your claim calculation. Here your claim is calculated by individual cost pool. But just know that both cost pools take the same calculation route from left to right. They're just displayed separately. Directly under the claim calculation are the column descriptions, and here is where the calculation steps are included that are taking place as it makes its way from left to right and ultimately produces your final claim reimbursement outcomes. So your calculated RMTS and MER percentages are multiplied to create your claimable amount. The claimable percentage is multiplied by your total base expenditure, so that's your number up top in the first table, to arrive at your total claimable amount. Moving on the second table, a little bit more to the right, the total claimable amount is multiplied by your indirect cost rate, and those two amounts together result in your total claim amount. Your total claim amount then goes on to be multiplied by the FFP percentage. The federal financial participation percentage, or FFP percentage, is how much the federal government will reimburse for the cost of delivering Medicaid services in an educational setting. As stated before, the direct services pool takes the same calculation route. Totals from each pool are added. They equal the grand total. And then your state and vendor shares are deducted in the LEA claim amount. So let's just recap that for a second. So once you have decided, or you have come to the calculation and outcome of your base expenditure, that then comes down here. Your RMTS is multiplied by your MER. You get that amount, which is your claimable percentage, is then multiplied by your base expenditure, which gives you your total claimable amount, which then your indirect cost rate, 15.01% of that total is reflected in your indirect claim and added. So this becomes your total claim amount, your FFP percentage. It's reduced by your FFP percentage, and that moves you out to your final claim for each cost pool. So this is your reimbursement, your grand total. When you look at your CPE form for right now, that is the total that is reflected on that CPE form at that point, because that really is your total. As it moves down, you have your state and vendor fees. And then this is your claimable amount, your LE claimable amount, and that is the amount that you're looking for, that bottom amount. That's what you're looking for in your checking account or in your school account or by paper check. So I know there's a lot of confusion in looking at the total amount and then looking at that LEA claim amount and trying to decide what is this amount that's come into my account. So you're signing off in your CPE form for the larger amount, because that is your award based on calculation. When you're looking in your account, your school identified account, you're looking at that bottom number to identify to match this invoice. So that is your MAC invoice. I also want to go over the cost settlement invoice, because equally the cost settlement invoice and how that is calculated and how that comes from what you enter for cost settlement in the cost report actually flows out to your reimbursement. So we'll talk about that. So the RR 830 is the cost settlement report. At cost settlement time, this report's going to provide detail of the cost settlement calculations, and it's provided in an Excel format, and each Excel report has two tabs. One tab is your cost summary report, and the second one is your cost settlement summary. The cost summary report shows a summary of all the costs and statistics that were reported by you or your LEA during the cost report. The cost settlement summary shows the final calculation route of cost settlement using Medicaid allowable costs from tab 1 and calculating in your interim payments and the FMAP application and how it arrives at your final cost settlement amount. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Lot to look at on this page. When you look at this page on your report in Excel, those three boxes at the bottom, those are your rates and ratios. Those are going to be below one another, just kind of edited to fit the slide. So let's take a look at how to read the information on the first tab. So this is representative of your first tab, which again is the cost summary report. This whole tab is a summary of those costs and data your LEA reported or provided during the cost report. The first part of the slide, the first table, lists all of the service types and the costs reported. Net direct costs less any reductions for federal or other state offsets is a total of all costs reported for service type minus, again, any federal or other offsets. This amount then goes on to be multiplied by your direct medical percentage. This rate is used to isolate the medical portion of those reported costs. The LEA UICR rate is then added to the net direct medical costs. And this total is multiplied then by your IEP ratio and results in the LEA's total Medicaid allowable costs all the way out to the right. So next is the transportation. If you report transportation, it takes a similar route, except specialized transportation, the rates and ratios it is multiplied by is your transportation ratio and your one-way trip ratio. So at this point in the calculation, some of you might be saying, well, you know, my transportation is a service type, so why isn't it up there with the other service types? That will happen on the next tab. But for now, because they take a similar but different route in the rates that are multiplied against the costs you report, they are separated at this point. So tuition is next, immediately below. And it is calculated out the same way, showing what you reported for your tuition if you report tuition. Below that, those three individual tables, those are actually a summary that appear on the General Statistics tab where you reported that data for the IEP ratio, the one-way trip ratio, and the transportation ratio that are used in those above calculations. So let's take a look at the second part. So to recap, this page is basically a summary of everything you reported in your cost report on all those tabs on your dashboard. This is a summary of all those different tabs. So then it moves on to the second tab. Thank you, Sherry. And this is where more of the magic happens, that it actually creates your reimbursement amount. So this is the cost settlement report, and starting with the Medicaid allowable costs calculated on tab 1, this is now your starting point. And you'll see that on this second tab, now transportation is now moved up to be one of your service types along with your other service types. Interim payments, if any, are deducted and results in your final Medicaid costs and totaled. Health-related tuition is then added to your totaled final Medicaid costs. So we're actually moving down this list now. Number 3 is where your interim payments are identified. Interim payments are deducted from the total Medicaid allowable costs, which is how you arrive at your total Medicaid cost settlement, plus or minus. So let's take a look at that again. Up here is all your service types. That's your number 1. It's going to show all your Medicaid costs that were calculated on the prior tab. It's going to also show if you had any interim payments in the next column. Please know that the interim payments that we get from Medicaid. And if there are no interim payments that are listed in what would be that second numeric column, none of your costs are allowable. For example, when you take nursing services into account, in this illustration, you had $50,000 of total Medicaid costs, but there were 0 interim payments. That does not mean that you did not bill. It means for whatever reason, as that claim took its route, it did not result in a paid claim. That's why those exception reports and the other reports that Sherry shared are so important for you to have a pulse on what you're claiming is getting paid and that you've made every effort to see that they get paid. Sometimes you can't help it, student aged out, you know, for whatever reason, those claims deny and are unfixable, but you should always be reviewing those reports to fix those that can be. So as you can see, there were no interim payments for nursing, which is the third line down. And because there were no interim payments, all of that $50,000 in costs become unallowable in your final calculation. So please make sure that you are billing regularly and that you're making sure that all those claims that can result in a paid claim result in a paid claim. So second, so you're taking that total Medicaid costs and that is being added to your total tuition reported tuition costs that were reported. And then your total Medicaid allowable cost, that's your new balance, the 150. From there, it goes down. It's calculated by your FMAP application. Historically, there is 2 FMAP percentages because they cross over the fiscal year. So there's 3 quarters and then 1 quarter. This year, there is actually 3 percentages that it is calculated by as we are unwinding the health emergency, and that enhanced FMAP rate that you had gotten because of the health emergency is now in the process of winding back down to that original FMAP rate. So this year and probably next year, you're going to see 3, and then after that, it'll go back to the 2 that you've always seen in the past. So when it calculates out your FMAP rate, again, it takes into consideration, and number 3 lists all your total interim payments, gives you a total of your interim payments that is deducted from your Medicaid allowable costs net, and that gives you your total final Medicaid cost settlement. So that is the route that it takes from what did I put in my cost report, tab 1, to what happens from there, tab 2. So the last report that I want to talk to you about is the RR 870, and that's your interim rate report. This report provides a list of the rates that will be used for this fiscal year's claims by procedure code modifier. So these are the rates that you will be paid per claim submitted if it makes it through to the payment process. And if you go to the RR 870, it is the bottom report, and you can click on that. You can run that in either Excel or PDF. I think PDF is an easier view personally, but just remember, if you run it in PDF, there is a page 2. Only page 1 is going to show on the screen. You'll have to actually click page 2. I've had a lot of people try to scroll down. They get stopped halfway down. They're like, we don't have any SLP rates. They're on page 2 in a PDF view. If you run it in Excel, you'll be able to scroll all the way down. So some key points to circle back and to kind of wrap up all the information you've seen today on reporting. I know it's a lot, but regular use of both the MAXCapture and e-SivicMACS reporting options provide methods for you to maintain and monitor program participation and compliance while identifying those areas of needed program improvement or growth. So we've kind of listed them side by side. On the left are the MAXCapture reports that Sherry spoke about. On the right is the e-SivicMACS reports. So take a look at them, go in there, see what they look like, see the information it generates, decide how this can best work for you and which ones work best for you. And they're really very helpful. So with that, I think we're going to move on to questions. Do you want me to go to the next slide before we do questions? Yeah. Okay, let me just wrap up. Again, like you've seen in other of the presentations today, policy questions, those pertaining to program policy, those are going to want to go to DHS. System questions, questions about the system's not operating the way you think it should, or you have a question about the trail it takes, those go to SSG. And I do want to take this time, I know that all of you know about your regional liaisons. They are an invaluable resource to you, so use them. If you have questions, they are your first line of help if you have any questions. They are separated by region. We have Jai Rexroad, and she's in charge of the north and south section of Central PA, and her contact information is on the screen. We have Maggie Keene, who is over Eastern PA, Gina Watson, Western PA, and their contact information is on the screen as well. So if you have any questions, please reach out to them. They're super happy to support you and answer any questions you have. And again, the survey link on this part of the presentation. We'll go ahead.